and the low response bidder is Henderson Roofing. I don't have that item. David, you want to know how much is it?
Henderson Contracting Services, LLC. The three were Scott General Contracting at $225,306, Venture Development $84,770, Henderson Contracting Services $79,975.
We'd ask for your authorization to enter into a contract with Henderson Contracting.
Thank you, Mr. Casella. Council, Ms. Trammell?
Mayor, I move that the City Council authorize the City Manager to execute a contract with Henderson Contracting Services, LLC in the amount of $79,975 for the removal and replacement of the Morgan Sports Center concession building roof and upper truss system, and fund this project with the city fund balance.
Thank you, Ms. Trammell. Is there a second? Mr.
Second.
Wood. Mr. Wood is a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, let's call the vote. Okay, motion passed unanimous, 7-0. Next up, item 35, local mitigation strategy, community rating, annual update. Mr. Casella?
I'd like Mr. Galander to explain this. He's more of an expert on this item than I am. So,
Council, this is an annual responsibility of the local government per their local mitigation strategy. Our local mitigation strategy is that document that we coordinate with the county to ensure that we have identified all those hazards and what capital improvements and what we'll be doing. As you saw in the attachment, we've got quite a bit of the stormwater projects that we got the grant for that will help with our flooding issues. So those have been identified in this update. This update then is sent back to the county goes first. They've adopted theirs last week, and then all the local jurisdictions that are associated with the county's local mitigation strategy adopt theirs, and that gets forwarded on to the state for compliance with our annual update for that. This is also linked to our community rating system. By us having that document updated and reviewed, we get points that enable us to hopefully maintain our rating, which then equates to reduced subsidized flood insurance through FEMA. So these are kind of some technical requirements that we do annually. We'll actually be updating the 2011 local mitigation strategy. We're supposed to do that every 5 years. So the county's initiating that process, and we'll be bringing that to you later this year, early next year.
Thank you, Mr. Galander. Ms. Trammell?
Mayor, I move that the City Council approve the 2015 Local Mitigation Strategy Community Rating System Annual Update.
Thank you, Ms. Trammell. Mr.
Second.
Wood? Mr. Wood is a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, let's call the vote. Motion passed unanimous, 7-0.
Thank you.
Next up, item number 36, City Destin Water Users Partnership for Red and Brunson Road repaving. Mr. Casella?
yeah, Mayor and City Council, what this item is the Destin Water Users is doing some sanitary sewer upgrades on Red and Brunson Way. And as part of that was going to resurface a portion of Red and Brunson. What this is basically authorizing moving $7,000 from city manager contingency over into the capital account necessarily to go ahead and resurface the whole road and do it right. So we're asking for your consideration of that.
Thank you, Mr. Casella. Ms. Trammell?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I can make the recommended motion since I sit on the board of DWU. So I'm asking the city attorney to advise me.
For you members that are also on that board, that service does not inure to your personal gain or loss. And,
okay.
And so, yes, you may.
All right, thank you. Then I will make the recommended motion. I move that City Council authorize the city manager to reimburse Destin Water Users, Inc. in the amount of $7,000 for the pavement overlay on Red and Brunson Road to be funded from the city manager contingencies account and transfer the funds to the public services account 0154160-534005.
Thank you, Ms. Trammell. Mr. Dixon? Or is there a second?
I will second
Okay.
it with a comment or question.
Okay. Yes, please, go ahead.
The road that, goes in front of the old Baptist church, and I can't remember the name of the road, is it, Forest Street? There's a very severe dip that's out there right where Red and Brunson Road comes out. And I've gotten a couple complaints on that, and I just want to make sure that when we're there doing all this paving work, that we can fix that ditch that's been cut across, that street. And I want to make sure I get assurances at city council meeting that we can get that done.
We will get that done. Right now, we have two projects going on at one time, and two separate contractors, and that's actually where they met. But yes, we'll make sure that dip gets taken care of.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dixon. Mr. Wood?
Disregard.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wood. Okay, we have a first by Ms. Trammell, second by Mr. Dixon. Any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll call the vote. Ms. Trammell? Motion passed unanimous, 7-0. Okay, item number 37, proposed regulations for outdoor storage and parking in residential neighborhoods. Mr. Casella?
Yeah, this is the item that you had your discussion 2 weeks ago. This is the final language. You wanted us to bring this back before we took it to the LPA and subsequently to the city, back to you for first and second reading. But this basically memorializes that you would be able to have one RV and then 2 additional trailers in the, either in the driveway and or in the side yard adjacent to the driveway. Everything else would have to be in the rear yard behind the fence. So, did I say that right?
Yeah, I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
Thank
So we would ask for your final endorsement that we'll get it to the LPA and basically back to the city council.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Casella. Thank you, Mr. Glander. City Council, first up is Ms. Ramswell.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the city manager initiate the ordinance adoption process by drafting an ordinance incorporating the recommended regulatory standards as provided herein.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ramswell, and then the first by Ms. Ramswell, second by Mr. Dixon. Did you have discussion, either one of y'all? Okay, Mr. Dixon?
I know what we're trying to do here with this, and I agree with it wholeheartedly. I do think there's about 10 pieces of property that do need to be something done with, but when we try to do things like this, I think we need to do it as a whole. And I kind of wonder what we're going to do with things like townhomes, things that are, that don't have side yards, things that where our lots are in some cases 40 or 50 feet wide in such areas such as Coventry Corners and some of the areas that can't accommodate this kind of stuff. What are we going to do there? I think we need to address it as well, and the reason why is because I drive through some areas and see some townhomes that have a lot of clutter. And so I really don't know what we're going to do with that one. I'm not trying to muddy it up, not trying to make more work. All I'm trying to do is point out that we're only covering a certain portion of our city when we adopt this thing, because I don't know how we're going to treat townhomes in smaller lots. So if somebody can help me with that, I'd sure appreciate it.
Very good point. Right now, it was focused on our single-family detached residential properties in those residential zoning districts. Yes, the homes that have restricted land area are going to have the options of finding other locations to store those vehicles and boats at this point in time. So that will have to be an additional policy discussion I think you all need to have to give us further direction on it. And I think it's along the same lines as we get this, and then there's always room for improvement and further evaluation on this.
I agree, and I'm not trying to muddy the water, as I said, but I do think that we need to consider it. So.
I do think at some point we will probably have to bring back, but this focuses, as Mr. Glander says, on the single family, which is where we've gotten most of the feedback as relates to our, comments we've received from the community.
Okay. Mr. Marler?
I know this is going to sound funny, but I did get some feedback on this, and one of the feedbacks I got was, what if I built a permitted fence around my front yard that blocked it? Does that? Well, that's why I said that's the.
Yeah, there's height limitations on fences in front yards, so you won't have a high enough one to.
Yeah, well, that was, like 3 people came up to me and said that, and they go, "Well, I'll build a fence." And I said, okay, fine, we'll see what happens.
Right.
All right.
All right, thank you, Mr. Marlar. We have a first by Ms. Ramswell, a second by Mr. Dixon. Is there any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, let's call the vote. Motion passed unanimous, 7-0. Okay, next up, item 38, Mr. Casella, City Manager.
Just a couple issues, a reminder that we do have planned for October 12th, Envision Destin coming back at 5:30 in this room. Keenan will have, their recommendations, final recommendations pursuant to the workshop we had in August. As a reminder, and I sent out an email, I believe, last week, the Okaloosa County on the 13th at 1 p.m. We'll be having the final rankings for the Okaloosa County Restore Act projects, which right now Clement Taylor and Heritage Park is ranked in the top 5. And then Mr. Miller had mentioned at the next week, at our next meeting on the 5th, we will have an executive session on the that Mr. Pleat's representing us on. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Casella.
I think it's at 5 o'clock, isn't it, Jerry?
On the 12th, 5 p.m.?
No, on the
Fifth.
5:30 on the 12th.
October 5th.
5th.
On the
5
5th
p.m.
at 5,
Gotcha.
and then 1 o'clock on the 13th.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm sorry, I had the things by 5 p.m. Okay. All right, now, item from comments from the audience. If anyone would like to come and speak, now's your opportunity to come and speak. If you'd please be mindful and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, would be outstanding. And the floor is now open. Are you coming to speak, Ms. Marcy? Okay, please.
Marcy Bell, Holiday Isle. I'm not here to talk about the hole. I'm not here to talk about that tonight. What I do want to talk about is why I come and talk to you all the time. You've seen me a lot this past year and most recently this summer, and it is truly about a fence that was placed at the end of my street. So, I have some items here I'm going to read. It makes it easier for me. So, you see, my husband and I own property adjacent to Parcel B out on Holiday Isle. My husband purchased 20 years ago in 1995, and earlier this year in January, a fence company showed up and installed a chain link fence on behalf of the owner of the adjoining property, without notice to any one of the 26 owners on our street. On February 2nd, I came here to the annex to inquire about the permit. At that time, the office here couldn't even locate the permit because the name that it was issued under was the wrong name. It was issued under it was issued under Destin Parcel B, LLC, when the owner of the property of record is Aqua Development, LLC. I was provided a copy of the permit and soon found it was requested to prevent trespassing, which all will become an important point as I go along. I further inquired with the front desk lady whether the fence permit was still open, to which the answer was a final inspection has not been completed. At that time, I requested to speak to someone in the office as I had many more questions. I was reintroduced to a Mr. Larry Ballard, who I'd previously worked with in the early 2000s because of my previous employment, and I was directed to his office to meet. Once we sat down and I began to explain why I was there, I informed Mr. Ballard the fence was blocking my deeded beach access. I'm sorry, I lost my place here. And specifically asked the question, the permit has the wrong name for the owner. Isn't that an issue? His response was, yes, it could be an issue. He had pulled the permit file for the fence. We sat and discussed how Gulf Breeze Court is a private road owned by 26 property owners equally, and the same document that deeded the road to us also deeded a pathway to give us beach access to the beaches and the jetties. When I left, he had placed a yellow sticky note on the outside with a note that I understood to have the word gate and a question mark and handed it to Noelle Bell in her office. A week went by and I heard nothing, so I called back to the department on Tuesday, February 10th, and was told by the lady who answered the phone that there would not be anything changed about the fence. So I obviously wasn't happy. I immediately requested a face-to-face meeting with Mr. Ballard, to which they accommodated me with a 1:30 that same afternoon. I had to decline and rescheduled for 2 days later, the morning of Thursday, February 12th. When I arrived, Mr. Ballard entered the conference room with another gentleman I now know as Mr. Ken Galander. I had no idea who he was and didn't quite understand his position with the city at that specific time. But the conversation was cordial. I pleaded my same case and was told that the property owner had the right to install the fence as they were his private property rights. I asked, but what about my private property rights? What about the rights of all my neighbors' private property rights? We are just randomly pushed to the side all because of one man's private property rights, and they're more important than ours? Most of us have been owners long before Aqua Development LLC has come along in 2012. He then told me it was a civil matter. So my next question was, a civil matter? Who am I going to sue? The city? His response, maybe. Before I left, I was told at the end he would have to give the city land use attorney and get back. He would have to get with the city land use attorney and get back with me to see if there was anything further. I asked when I could expect to have a return call, and he said in about a week. That was February the 12th, and today is September 21st. Nearly 7 months have passed. I've seen Mr. Galander at Pepito's during his lunch breaks from work. I've seen him here at council meetings. I've seen him at Envision meetings. He always greets me with a nice smile and a hello, but not one time in person has he ever said to me, hey, I need to follow up with you about that fence issue. Or, sorry it's taken me so long, but I have an answer for you from the land use attorney about your fence. And I've never once received that phone call back from him regarding him speaking with the city land use attorney about the fence. Before you ask me the question on why I didn't make contact back with Mr. Galander, simply stated, because I knew he never had any intentions of following up with me from the moment he had told me he would contact me back. As I have researched everything, the deeper I dug, the more I have learned. His intent was just to get me out the door and hope that I just went away.
Ms. Bell, if you can get to it's
Yes,
over
so
3 minutes. Thank you.
So here I am.
Thank you.
So let me put some things into perspective regarding Parcel B and the fence. 1, in the late 50s and the early 60s, the Army Corps of Engineers received a spoils easement to place necessary dredged material on Parcel B, as well as the lands adjacent to Parcel B along its westerly line. This easement was granted to maintain Destin's East Pass for navigational purposes from the Gulf of Mexico through to the Choctawhatchee Bay, which is a part of the National Intercoastal Waterway System. Although the spoils easement has been in place for 50-plus years, dredging of the East Pass has been funded by the U.S. government since at least the 1860s. That's right, back during the time of President Abraham Lincoln's term, I have found the documentation showing that it was appropriated by the U.S. Congress. An unrecorded plat prepared by the 1970s shows 3 roads and 3 beach accesses. One is at the Gulf Breeze Court, the second is next door at Gulf Winds Court, and the third is what is known as Poolside Villas. This will all become important at the end of my presentation.
Ms. Bell, this is way over 3 minutes, and I know I was going to give you some leniency, but if there's something you need city staff to look at, then we can have them look at it, or is there?
I would just like to finish. I don't have very much longer.
Okay, I'll give you about 30 more seconds.
34 years ago, in *81, Gulf Breeze Court was deeded forever, and in perpetuity, the street we use for ingress and egress to our properties, along with a deeded beach access by 12 individuals, specifically to give us unobstructed access to the beaches of the Gulf of Mexico and the East Pass, as well as the East Jetty for snorkeling and fishing. Perpetuity is a strong word to be included in a formal deed to all of a sudden today in 2015 hold no merit. A few months later, in early '82, all of the sand that lies south of Gulf Breeze Court, Gulf Winds Court, and Poolside Villas, west of Destin Point and along the Osteen Public Beach access, was deeded to the state as conservation land forever and in perpetuity. In that same document, it states there are never to be any fences erected upon the conservation lands. Once again, perpetuity is a strong word to be included in a formal deed to all of a sudden today in 2015 hold no merit. So which brings me to current day 2015.
Mayor, point of order,
Please.
30 seconds is gone.
Yeah, it's, Ms. Bell, we have to, please, if you can get with city staff on this, we've given a
The
lot of
problem I'm
leniency.
trying to say to you is I've already addressed city staff. City staff doesn't even call me back.
Well, it will be addressed.
Mrs. Bell, you and I spoke.
No, you and I.
No, you and I spoke, and I told you the matter that you were describing was a private matter, a prescriptive easement, a prescriptive claim.
At that time, that was our conversation. I have since done much research.
Well, that's
And the
fine.
only conversation you and I specifically had was to the fact that the city records showed my street as a city street and it's a private street. That's the only conversation you
And
and
I
I had
s-
by telephone.
And I said, and you asserted that you had a right to cross parcel B, And I said that was a prescriptive easement claim that you had to pursue through
Since
circuit
that
court.
time, I have located state records that show that that's a conservation land, and on that document states that there is no fence allowed.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I may instruct council.
Please, thank you.
Council, you should not comment on anything that relates to the manager's management of employees or employee conduct issues. They are within his jurisdiction. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Miller. Thank you, Ms. Bell.
I have
Appreciate
one last item to say. The city of Destin is allowing the developer to
Ms.
hold.
Bell, we're not going to discuss this
They're holding
anymore.
my
Ms. Bell.
property.
Point of order.
Yes, thank you. With this, thank you. This, anybody else? I'm sorry, Ms. Bell, thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak this evening? Okay, this meeting's, yes.
Ms. Bell, I'd like to request if you wouldn't mind sending me an email, just sort of highlighting what you're talking about with the fence, these issues. I'd like to hear the rest of the story.
Anyone else like to speak? Seeing this meeting's adjourned.